Could I just get a thumbs up just so that I know? Yeah, I've got one. Great. So hopefully everybody can see the platform. As Sarah said, we're going to use the Digital Benin platform today itself and sort of use that as the background to our presentation, myself and Eiloghosa. And we're going to initially outline the platform and sort of the aims and give you a little bit of an overview, as I'm not sure how many people will know what Digital Benin is. So we just want to give you that little bit of context, and then I'll hand over to my colleague Eiloghosa, who will talk a little bit more about the Eiloghosa space that she was really critical in developing. So just very briefly, to introduce ourselves, my name is Imogen, and I'm here with my colleague Eiloghosa. I don't know if you want to just say hi quickly.
Hi, hello. I'm Obobaifo, one of the researchers on Digital Benin project.
Great, thank you, Eiloghosa. So just to briefly sort of overview the platform, as it was mentioned earlier today by Liz Johnson in the keynote, Digital Benin is an online platform that brings together data about objects and cultural heritage that was looted from Benin City in 1897 by British forces. The platform launched in November 2022, and it was funded by the Ernst von Siemens Kunststiftung and hosted by the Museum am Rottenbaum in Hamburg. It was also developed in collaboration with various institutes, universities and museums in Nigeria and also in Europe. I'm going to first also give a bit of an introduction to the team behind the platform and the team that Eiloghosa and I are part of. So I'm going to go to the About part of the platform just here. So the project team is made up of 5 principal investigators who are based in Nigeria, also in museums and universities across Europe and in the US. Alongside the PIs, there's a group of researchers, and Eiloghosa and I are part of that. And each of the researchers has their own areas of interest and expertise, be it history or more from a museum background, or in terms of provenance. And so we all kind of work together to bring in that different knowledge and expertise alongside PIs. We also worked with a fantastic group of developers, data engineers and designers. Christelle and Alex are from Behavior Over Time, and they helped to develop, they developed the platform. And Gwendolyn was the data engineer who was based with me in Hamburg. And we also worked with Ozaze Amadasun, who's an artist from Benin City, and he designed, was very involved in the design process of the whole platform, but in particular designed a lot of the icons that you'll see on the platform and that Eiloghosa will speak a little bit more about when I hand over to her. We also worked with a range of consultants, some of whom are from and live in Benin City, but also elsewhere in Nigeria and across the African continent. And these consultants are community members, historians, linguists, and they provided really important reflections for us when we were developing the platform, helping to review content, sometimes to actually develop it and to research. But in general, we're very critical in terms of providing a sort of external perspective to the work that we were doing through the 2 years. So as you can see, we're quite a large group of people that all came together, and the project team is diverse and has a range of different interests, and all of those were very critical and important in terms of developing the platform that you see here. So I'm just going to navigate back to the homepage, and you'll see that there are 7 different sort of spaces or entry points. And the reason for these 7 different entry points was to provide different ways into the data that is shown on the platform and that was shared with us by museums. We wanted to move beyond just developing, or I don't want to say just developing, but only having a catalogue, but we wanted there to be different ways into the data because we recognized that we were aiming for the platform to be used by a range of different audiences that may have different levels of knowledge or different understanding or just different interests. So we wanted to provide these different entry points to kind of cater for that and to provide different spaces that would then allow people to move through the platform. So Digital Benin has brought together data and has had data shared with us by 121 museums. I'm going to go to the map to show you a visualization that shows the spread of the institutions. So this shows all 121 worldwide in over 20 countries. And each of the blue pins represents a different institution. The lighter colors are those with fewer royal artifacts in their collections, and the darker the color indicates that there are more royal artifacts in their collections. So this gives you a sense of the spread of those institutions, but also the concentrations in North America and in Europe. To return or to go to the catalogue, here you can see that we had data about 5,246 objects shared with us. And these objects come from, as I said, 121 institutions, but we actually had over 400 data sets shared with us through the platform. And if I navigate to one, I'll talk to you a little bit about one of the kind of principles that was really important to sort of Digital Benin as we develop things. So the institution data is reflected here. And when we were asking institutions to share data with us, we asked them to preserve the structure that they themselves use. So each institution provided data to us in a different manner. And here you can see an AMA or a relief plaque from Benin City. And the data is presented here as the Pitt Rivers Museum records it themselves. And we also indicate when the data was transferred to us and the method that it was transferred to us. And that was really important because we wanted to try and preserve the locality of the data for each institution and to be able to present this data as they themselves would record it. And therefore people can sort of look across the different collections and see the variation and difference. However, in order to allow people to kind of search and filter and use that catalogue, we also developed Digital Benin research that myself and Eiloghosa were part of creating. And this involved developing various vocabularies that sort of allow people to search across the very diverse museum data that we received. So I worked on the English designation and the object category vocabularies, which you see here. And I then collaborated with Eiloghosa with her work towards creating the Edo designations that you see in the top here. And when I began working for Digital Benin in October 2021, we recognized the importance of sort of bringing in the English terms for the objects, because in the case of Benin, a lot of research has gone into developing quite often specific terminology around the sort of the different types of objects that are typically seen in this corpus. However, we recognize that a lot of that work and that research, although important, was and is very Eurocentric and comes from a sort of art historical and museum background. And therefore, Eiloghosa's work with the Edo designations became increasingly important to bring in sort of Edo knowledge about these objects and to be able to present and amplify that. So I'm now going to hand over to Eiloghosa to talk us through the Aoto space that she worked on.
Thank you so much, Imogen. I'll be talking through Aoto space, as she mentioned earlier, and Aoto basically, it means a foundation or a building foundation. So we saw the Aoto space as important to understand most of all of the Benin objects. We should understand the background or the context of where these objects are coming from. So the purpose of Aoto space in Digital Benin is to represent the historic objects in their accurate Edo designation, which results in object categories that employ terminologies distinct from that of museums outside of Nigeria. The object groups are shown visually expressed verbally and described in written by the identified Edo designations. The information provided by the current holding institutions is categorized. The naming of historical items in the Edo setting is the subject of this fundamental research. Eyoto, like I said earlier, means foundation, and in this context can be understood as a foundation to fill in the gaps in institutional knowledge creation, current museum data, or even the omission of spoken, visual, and written Edo language concerning these objects. Eyoto serves as a foundation for further research into historical objects and their ingrained Edo culture. The digital research area, which is comparable to Eyoto, which means Edo celebrated laying the which Edo people celebrated laying the foundation of a new building, illustrates the start of knowledge production that involves the active involvement and participation of Edo people in Nigeria and in the diaspora. By providing the Edo designation of the objects and outlining their use, purpose, and creation, art historical interpretation in the introductory paragraphs, this section aims to provide an insight into the cultural value of this object. Users can gain and view an overview of the individual objects owing the visual description. The research is interdisciplinary. It is based on the study of a written form of language, and that emerged from a colonial context. Historical research was used to comprehend the enormous gaps and lack of object description in Edo language. The field of digital humanities served as a foundation for building a digital catalog that allows for flexibility and customization. This study is contextualized and constructed with recent museum data. So at the beginning of the project, we worked with 3 museums in Nigeria where we gathered data, which was primarily in the form of the catalog cards and inventory books, and these were mostly handwritten. We had to digitize these cards manually, and in the process of the digitization and transcribing, and we noticed that there were gaps in the data. There were misrepresentations, misinterpretations, omission of words or letters, which in the case of some indigenous language can totally change the meaning of a word or a phrase. So we had to involve linguists and we had to do research in Benin City, spoke with historians, professors in the university, and we developed the Eyoto space that has given us today the various Edo designation for the objects. And in the process of this, we incorporated vocalizations voiced by a male and female to highlight the way in which Edo is first and foremost a spoken language, and it also improved accessibility for different audiences. Since Edo is mostly a spoken language, tone affects how words are understood. It's required undertaking unique study on the meaning and linguistic and ethnographic context of the artifacts in order to include spoken language in the digitization process. Field research, expert consultation, and peer evaluations, and the media production workshops were all included in the research plan, and that's a research plan that was designed. We began creating vocabulary for the objects in standardized written and spoken language, since the misspellings were more evident in the written form of the Edo language. The strategy here is object-oriented as opposed to object-focused. Since Edo is primarily spoken, object identities depend on the context in which they are applied. This is because Edo is a context-sensitive language. The same object can therefore be named, understood, and described in a variety of ways in Edo. And for this project, we decided on a consistent method of defining an object with a more general description and the usage context due to time restrictions. Okay, so I will be moving on to the coloring book. Oh, sorry, before then, we have the vocalization which I mentioned earlier, which Imogen will help us play now, so we can hear how the objects or the Edo designations are pronounced appropriately. Okay, so we have this across all the object categories on the Edo designation page. So I will be moving on to the coloring book and the language card. Okay, so the coloring book and the language card was designed by Osaze Amadasun, the artist Imogen mentioned earlier, and okay, so it was developed as a learning material for students. You can download the drawings of the object groups illustrated in the coloring and learn more about the objects. This study too was developed by Osaze Amadasun, and he also developed or produced all the iconography on the platform, and it can also be downloaded by smartphone users through the QR code at the bottom of the cards. And we want to promote artistic study and interpretation of the artifacts in this area, both online and offline. Why is Edo designation so important? Eyoto and Edo designation are particularly important as this offers a space where the objects can be seen and identified within the context of the Edo language, and that they were originally made and used within, and we situate them within Benin-centered knowledge. Also, the importance of vocalizations, as discussed before. Objects were misinterpreted in the past, either with Edo spelling correctly written or another word another word mispronounced helps to contextualize the objects and give them their right names in their original language. Eiloghosa also provided a space where Edo speakers could interact with the thousands of objects through the Edo language, spoken, written, and pictorial for the first time since 1897. How have the community members been a part of developing Eiloghosa space? We engaged with guild members, historians.
Well, I'm going to come in here because Eiloghosa's audio is cracking up, but also we're a few minutes over and due another presentation. So I don't know, Imogen, if you want to try and wrap us up.
Yes, I can. So yeah, unfortunately, Eiloghosa, I think her connection may have just gone. However, I just wanted to finish off what she was saying. Oh, I don't know if there's a way to mute her. I don't want to talk over her.
I've hit the mute button. It might take a second.
Sure, thank you. So Eiloghosa was just going to finish off saying that community members were involved in the process sort of from the beginning, really. So she worked with members of the guilds, as well as local historians and historians and linguists within the university throughout the process to incorporate their knowledge into what we developed for the platform. And all of that was done on a sort of consultation honorarium basis. So there was a conversation before about remuneration. So that was very critical to that work that we did and that Eiloghosa did. And there was also a workshop in May 2022 where we brought together a range of different community members and worked on this. I'm really sorry for running over, but you can find out more information about the work that we did in the About section in the documentation here. And just wanted to say thank you again for listening to us talk today.